When I read about this, I got really excited, and I think clearly a lot of you guys did too. How many people in the room want a Tesla? Yeah, me too. I sent my wife a text, and she said, ooh, people from the company are going to be there? Ask if they'll give us one. Yeah? No? Rats. All right. Well, let's get started, because these guys have a lot to get through. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce Marc and Kevin, who are going to talk to us about hacking the Tesla Model S. Let's give them a big hand.
All right. Thank you all for coming. Let me hopefully not unplug this as I pull it even closer. All right. So I'm Kevin Mahaffey here with Marc Rogers. We're here to talk about some work that culminated very recently in hacking the Tesla Model S. What you're actually hearing right now is the door chime sound we extracted from the Tesla Model S firmware. And if you think it's annoying to have it for 8 minutes as you come into a room, try it for 14 hours a day, 3 days straight. It's pretty terrible. All right. So this talk is a lot about how do we secure cars. Some cars, when they need a patch, need to be recalled. And that's clearly not going to work in the future as cars run all sorts of open source software that needs to be patched seemingly weekly. We're very proud to say that as a result of our research, Tesla pushed a patch yesterday, I believe, to every single Model S in the world. You click one button, it's applied. So I'm super excited about that. Aha. You want to take it?
So I guess the, oh, is this working?
Try this one.
Yeah, swap. Hi, I'm also known as CJ. Many of you probably see me shouting at you in the corridors, so sorry for that. The reason we started hacking the Model S is because it's the most connected car in the world. And we figured if we were going to look at car security, we should look at the car that arguably is the reference design every other car is probably going to end up being using. It has the most connected features, it has the most technology in it, and we wanted to see how well it did. And also, we wanted to do that bearing in mind that in the future, we're going to see an explosion of connected things. And we already have a problem with embedded devices being vulnerable and not being updated. Imagine how bad that problem is going to be when you go through from a few million connected devices to 25 billion devices.
And you might replace your computer or your phone every couple years. Things stay around for a long time. So if you're not actually fixing vulnerabilities, you can have a car that might last for 10 years, and if it's unfixed, that's a giant deal. So what we're trying to do is secure all the things. But when that happens, you have all these new industries building connected things, right? These are industries that don't have software experience. And you might ask the question of when companies who don't have software experience all of a sudden build software and go to the front lines of the internet, which is kind of a tough place if you're not aware of it, bad things happen. And so we ask the question, are there best practices in mind? Like, do people know how to build secure things? If there aren't.
I was going to say, it's not that these companies set out to make vulnerable things. The biomedical companies who make insecure biomedical devices are still following best practice for biomed. The car companies that make insecure cars are probably following every single bit of best practice for car. They're just not internet security companies, and so they don't fully understand the threat landscape. And this is where the best practice ideas come in.
And so if there aren't best practices, even through no malicious act of any company, you have something that approximates this. Right? It's nobody's doing anything bad. They're just kind of running business. They're competing with competitors, and they march quickly to their doom. Quick note, I was really actually happy to see that Lemmings survived. Like I was able to find a GIF of the internet of Lemmings 2. Thanks. That was the easiest part of the talk, as it turns out. But if there are best practices, even if companies aren't cybersecurity experts, they can actually have a lot that goes pretty well. And that's really one of the goals of our research is to say, look, we believe every company should be level 10 cybersecurity, but right now if you're level 0, there's a couple easy ways to level up to 3, 4, or 5 and actually do raise the bar substantially for attacks.
And let's face it, even if you are level 10, anything that man makes, man can break. And it's how these companies deal with vulnerabilities that sets them apart from their competitors.
All right, so best practices, we got it. They're important. They're especially good when people are building the systems for the first time, because if anyone who's been in a mature organization, trying to change an existing system after it's shipped is really hard. So why the Model S? Well, the Model S is, we originally chose it because we thought it would be the car that was most well designed from a security standpoint. A lot of the engineers behind it have experience in the software industry. We didn't know if that was going to be the case, but we found actually it is. It's actually designed very, very, very well. And so we hope that if there's anyone involved today or tomorrow in the automotive industry, that you can hopefully take some of this, the learnings we have and what we're going to show about the architecture of the Model S, what they did right, what they did wrong, and what they're planning to do in the future, and apply it to every other car on the planet to hopefully make sure that cars get more secure.
Now what this talk isn't. This talk is not about how everyone with a connected car is going to die.
Nor are we just releasing tools that allow you to very easily pull something off GitHub, hack your car, not know Unix. I was wondering how that was going to go over. Good. All right, so public service announcement.
You have to be really careful hacking cars. A car isn't just a computer system. A car is a computer system that's traveling at 100 miles an hour, at 65 miles an hour.
Yes, officer, I swear. And the worst thing that happens isn't a blue screen. I mean, that should be obvious, but like seriously, you know, DEF CON, we have a sense of mischief here, which I love. But when you're dealing with things that go that fast and are that safety critical, you have to be really, really careful. And so what we did is when we started this research, we collaborated with a great group of people. We set some very, very strong rules of engagement.
So the first thing is, when you're hacking embedded systems, it is really, really hard to tell whether you're hacking the embedded system or if you've accidentally transversed into the company it's connected to. So we took extreme precaution to make sure that we didn't accidentally hack Tesla. The next thing was, like, we set ourselves some boundaries in terms of the kind of things that we could do to the car. We didn't do anything that would make permanent changes because as we knew we were exploring a black box system, we couldn't foresee what effect any changes would have to the ongoing safety of that vehicle. You know, what happens if you overwrite a firmware that happens to go to the ECU that controls braking? Bad things.
That's not good.
So we agreed that we would do everything in memory as much as possible. We would only probe, and we would just prove concepts of things.
During the research, we're actually really happy to see Tesla established a bug bounty program. And so we modified the original rules of engagement from, you know, don't touch any servers to touch the servers they allow us to touch, which turns out to be a lot of them.
And they absolutely started the bug bounty program before we started.
Okay, so I'm sure a lot of you here are interested in, like, okay, what is the Model S? What is it? What's inside? Remember these words very carefully. So there are 3 systems on the infotainment network. One is the IC, that's the instrument cluster. That's the thing, the 8-inch screen above your steering wheel. Number 2 is the CID, the center information display, I think. It's a 17-inch touchscreen, which is the thing in the middle, the really cool laptop in your car. And then there's the gateway, which we illustrated here as somewhere on the dash, but it's actually attached to the PCB of the CID, but looks better that way. So IC, instrument cluster, CID, center information display, also known as the touchscreen, gateway. Got it? Cool. 2 of which are Linux systems based on NVIDIA Tegra 3 in the case of the IC, Tegra 4 in the case of the CID. And there's an RTOS we determined to be free RTOS is the gateway.
And both of the Linux systems are running Ubuntu. Very old Ubuntu.
Okay, so here's how the architecture of the system works. We're going to go, you know, to this pretty quickly and get into how we actually figured this all out. You have an infotainment network and the vehicle network. The LAN, just Ethernet LAN on the infotainment side. You have the CAN, which is the vehicle side. And the only thing, as far as we can tell, that bridges the two is what's called this gateway. That's going to be very, very important. From a systems architecture standpoint, the CID and the IC are connected via a USB Ethernet adapter to the Ethernet switch. The CID has Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and cell connectivity and exposes that to any internal systems in various ways. The gateway is the only thing, again, that bridges the Ethernet and the CAN bus. And then all of the vehicle controllers are presumably attached to that CAN bus.
This is actually a phenomenal design. We'll get into it in more detail later, but if you think about this, this is more like the way that airplanes are designed than cars are designed.
So this project was basically the Hacker Olympics. I mean, it was everything from physical security to browser hacking to network reverse engineering to binary reverse engineering. So it was actually kind of fun because we got to exercise all sorts of parts of our brain.
We'd previously submitted 6 vulnerabilities to Tesla. It took 3 of them for us to gain administrative access to those systems. We had to leverage 1 to get access at all, had to leverage another to get enough information to work on it, and had to leverage another to gain privilege access. We'll go into what they were in more detail, but it took a lot of thinking outside of the box.
All right, so what were we able to find? So just want to preview. What we're talking about is physical access, and we implanted a remote SSH backdoor in the car, and we had some fun with it.
So the video you're going to see now is a Model S with a remote SSH backdoor installed, and what we can do with that SSH backdoor.
So what you were able to see there is we had root on 2 of the systems of the car. We were able to control the UI on the instrument cluster in the 17-inch touchscreen, and as you also saw, and we'll go into a little bit more detail later, we were able to control some of the vehicle aspects of the car itself.
And what that essentially means is we could do anything that the touchscreen can do. So in the case of this car, the 17-inch touchscreen is the way the driver does a lot of the stuff that the driver would want to do. So we can power off the car, start it, lock it, unlock it, open, close the sunroof, open, close the trunk, control the headlights, honk the horn, turn on the internal lights, etc.
Okay, so how did we actually go do that? So let's first inventory. What's in this car? Number 1, security bits. Have these, they're kind of expensive, get them from Amazon. Very easy to find. Number 2, these are really important. If you are pulling off door panels on a car, you do not want to do it without these. You will likely break things.
And when you're dismantling a Tesla, which is something that makes you very nervous because it's rather expensive, you will hear sounds that sound like plastic breaking. It is normal.
These are terrible. I'm not joking. Like these were like my nemesis as we were disassembling this thing.
When you're ripping the front console off of your friend's $100,000 car and it sounds like plastic shattering, it makes you pause for a minute.
All right, so we were able to pull out the instrument cluster. Here is the back side of it. Here's the front side of the PCB. It's a Tesla-designed board with an NVIDIA basically processing module on it. Here's the back of the board. What we were looking for anything we could get access to. Unfortunately, not so much. Then we pulled out the CID, the Center Information Display. Lots of cables, which is interesting. Opened it up and then tried to find what we can find. This is the back side of the CID, and you might notice a few things. Ooh.
SD cards.
Ooh. 2 memory cards. And a USB header. And then we have a very mysterious port. We don't know what it is. Okay, so from our physical analysis, we found a number of things. Test points and diagnostic interfaces, JTAGs, so on and so forth. That gets a little scary to touch in a live system, so set that aside for a sec. Removable memory cards. This is nice. USB, nice. Mysterious cable. All right, so now that we know what's physically on the device, we wanted to go check out what we can do. So let's try to probe the fences.
So the browser. You remember me saying that it was an old Ubuntu system? The browser's also very old. WebKit 534, it's about 4 years old, and there are several pretty well-known vulnerabilities for it. Probably the most well-known is the vulnerability that was used by Keen Team to win Prone to Own 2014, also used for the PS Vita exploitation.
And this is actually a really important question. When you're designing any sort of system, they're using Qt WebKit, which is from the Qt framework. And if you sit downstream of a project, and so Tesla, for example, is not only downstream from WebKit to fix a bug, they're also downstream from Qt WebKit as far as we can tell. I don't know if they're pulling directly from the WebKit source, but this is actually a really big problem. You see it in Android devices also, where if you have multiple upstreams that are required to be patched for you as an end user or manufacturer to patch, that actually creates a pretty big logistical challenge when you have a highly iterating thing upstream. So this, the vulnerability that Marc mentioned, that was used to blind exploit the PS Vita, it was effectively if you do a JavaScript sort with a custom compare function and you modify the array underneath that sort, you can write stuff to fun places. We were not able to get that to do any arbitrary memory read writes. We were doing it blind. We got the browser to reliably crash, but that's not entirely very helpful.
And to be fair, we spent about some total of, I think, 12 or 16 hours on it because we found a much easier way in.
Bluetooth. Not much special there. USB. So this was actually a really, really complicated thing to do, actually, just from like the cable hacking side of this Hacker Olympics. You see that little the header right there? So we actually had to fit this all back in the case to put it back in the system because we didn't want to apply our own power supply. We wanted to use the vehicle. And we actually had to modify the USB cable slightly to be able to get it to actually fit.
So it gave us access. We could talk to the NVIDIA processor. Unfortunately, the firmware, locked.
Yep. So the Tegra bootloader needs a password to be able to extract the firmware. We didn't have that password, so no cigar. And by the way, if you're kind of saying like, wow, they're talking about all the ways they didn't get in, I think that's really important because any sort of real hack isn't just, you just try, you guess the password and automatically you get in. It's like failure, 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 success. And I think that's important to realize in any sort of pen test like this.
Memory cards much easier. They had some fun things on them. Readable file systems. One of them just contained mapping data, which not so interesting, but there was a script on there that appears to run as root. Interesting. The other one, much more interesting, has a tar file called car keys, which contains keys.
We were very happy when we saw that.
And appreciated the name.
Yeah, car keys are cryptographic nowadays. Wi-Fi. This was interesting. So there were no open ports when we connected the car to our Wi-Fi system. Interesting tidbits. As soon as it connects to Wi-Fi, it first determines internet reachability by performing HTTP requests against a number of sites, similar to how the iPhone determines reachability versus captive portal. And then it will connect to a VPN endpoint using OpenVPN upon determining internet reachability. And so, of course, the question is, can we mine in the middle of the VPN connection? Their OpenVPN connection that we were immediately able to determine, UDP, they were using a TLS auth key. So those of you who are familiar with OpenVPN, that's not actually authentication. That's we're going to HMAC the packet so that you can defend the OpenVPN server from DDoS, and people don't have that static key. But there's still an SSL key exchange with client server auth after that. So simply presence of that TLS auth key does not give you authentication. It just kind of enables the ability to talk TLS to the server. And so, of course, we take a look at their PKI. So there's a Tesla root CA, which, of course, is self-signed. It chains down to a policy CA, and then that changed down to an issuing CA. So interestingly, their VPN server, which is what their legitimate VPN server exposes, changed up to that issuing CA. And the car key, or that car key, yeah, quite literally, also changed up to that same CA. Interestingly, if you're familiar with X509 v3 extended key usage, you can actually say this key can only be used for X. In this case, the VPN was web server auth, and the client was client auth. And there's a setting in OpenVPN of whether you want to pay attention to X509 v3 EKU. And so we asked the question, which is, okay, when the car talks to our OpenVPN, and it sends the SSL client hello, the server sends its server hello and a certificate request, what if it sends the certificate of the car. As you know, they chain up to the same route. So if the car is not validating that EKU and is treating the issuing CA as its certificate authority, that would work. However, Tesla did a really good job. They do actually validate that EKU. So we couldn't man in the middle with that key. However, if you find any certificate that chains to that issuing CA and has the server auth EKU, you could impersonate that VPN most likely, unless there's some other craziness going on. So we haven't found any yet, but I would say just word of caution to anyone implementing OpenVPN, make sure you are testing for that EKU so you don't just allow any client who has a valid cert to impersonate that VPN system. The mystery port.
It took us a while to work out what it was. Actually, I'd like to claim credit for working out what it was, but some folks on the internet found it for us. It's Ethernet.
Yes. All right, so now we have digital connectivity inside the car. This helps a lot. It's going to go faster from here. So as soon as we connect, we were instantly barraged with UDP. Oh, dear God. That's a lot of UDP. It's 500 to 1,000 packets per second. UDP broadcast. Yikes.
So to answer the question of what kind of telemetry does the car collect internally, the answer is everything. Literally everything. I don't necessarily know what it does with that data, but you have to kind of pick your way through it before you can find the interesting stuff.
All right, so now we're in a realm that I know a lot of people here are familiar with. You get access to a new network, what do? You nmap it. So first, the CID. We found a bunch of stuff on this thing. Lots and lots of open services, yay. The IC, fewer, but yay. Gateway, also fewer, but open stuff. Okay, so we have a lot of attack surface.
Those of you who, like me, are hackers from the 80s and 90s, OpenX11, really?
SSH, we tested. We tried to man in the middle. They do validate host keys, so that was not helpful. So typically what you would do if you find two systems that automatically communicate via SSH, you might try to build an SSH honeypot, hope they do password authentication, and they send the password dutifully to your honeypot. Didn't work, which is good. We did find two services were running out-of-date versions. The vulnerabilities that are in it, we didn't really explore the true extent of what could be done, but those are old versions with known vulnerabilities to them. So OpenX11. Go ahead.
So OpenX11, what's not to like? Essentially, the most immediate thing that you can do with that is the little display console that sits in front of the driver that replaces the instrumentation cluster, where your speedometer and odometer are. You can put whatever you want up on there. So forget ludicrous speed. My car goes at 1,000,000 miles an hour.
Screenshot to prove it.
Yeah. You can also run commands. You can start different services, etc. So having an OpenX11 server is great.
This was about, I think, like 3 a.m. at this point. So we had a little fun with the OpenX11 server. All right. So what else do the other open services do? We found what is called the IC and the CID updater that, when given a status command, displays a lot of very juicy information.
These appear to be binary firmware tools for getting diagnostic information, uploading files, uploading firmwares, managing firmwares, etc. A lot of the commands are secured with an auth command, but quite a lot of them are considered to be safe, including the status command, which gives you a ton of interesting information, like the file systems mounted, the state of the system, the download URLs for the firmware.
And we were very happy to see this. Okay, there is a URL that you can reach that can give you firmware.
If only we had the car keys.
Note, this is not reachable from the internet. It was only reachable from inside the VPN. But just that time, we had a setback. Mark mentioned the internet had also found this was an open Ethernet port, and Tesla dutifully issued an OTA patch to block it. They locked it down.
The fix was pretty clever. From what I can tell, they essentially start you up on an empty VLAN, so you can't see anything, and you have to go through a magical authentication process to tell the car to put you on a VLAN where interesting stuff is. However, Why go through all of that hassle of reverse engineering things when you can just man in the middle one of the legitimate systems?
So that's actually, we took the instrument cluster, and it has one of those 4-pin, it had the male connector, but we didn't have one of these connectors.
So we made one.
That is Scotch tape. It's actually really hard to find insulating tape that's that thin. And so we effectively man-in-the-middled the instrument cluster. So we plugged something in, made an Ethernet cable, plugged another Ethernet cable into the vehicle, and hooked it up to a switch. So now we have our access restored to the system.
And now the little instrumentation cluster is constantly authenticating us and our switch, and we can plug into that switch and pretty much do whatever we want.
Okay, so the breakthrough. Marc mentioned that we have car keys. So one day we were looking at that CID updater, and it mentioned a very nice URL. So we have the VPN keys. We did our man in the middle, so we know what the OpenVPN configuration is. So we should be able to move forward, right? Well, actually, there's a lot of OpenVPN configuration you have to set, and we didn't know it all. And a lot of it is exposed post the SSL encrypted channel, so we can't just look at the ciphertext traffic and figure it out. However, if you turn...
I was going to say, this is when hackers really like developers who put in verbose switches.
So if you use an OpenVPN client and you turn on verbosity up to 11, it will actually tell you the server-side desired cipher, HMAC, the MTU, all the things you need to establish a valid VPN connection. Typically, you don't need to actually blindly figure out VPN settings, but that's how you do it in the case of OpenVPN. So about 600-something megabytes later, we have the firmware.
I have to say, the firmware is not a complete file system. It appears that they incrementally update the firmware, so I guess they look at what bits are missing from the car based on when it last got a firmware update or something. So what we ended up with was a partial file system that contains a lot of interesting bits.
So let's examine it. It's SquashFS file system, compressed file system, fairly easy to get access to. We decompress it, get really excited because we see a lot of very, very fun things. So this is a quiz time. You have a firmware file system. What do you look for first? But wait, hold on. We had some interesting observations we want to share first. We found a lot of fun things in the firmware. Here's a few of them. One is there's a log rotate script. This was really what nailed it home. This car is a server. Right? It has the same sort of management that you would have in a data center.
It's a data center on wheels.
That's cool. Like a car that has servers inside. Wow. We found another fun thing. It was like, okay, firmware bundles.vn.teslamotors.com 4567 custom packages Knights Who Say. So like, okay, well, I'll send it over the VPN, see what happens. Well played, Tesla. Well played.
WTF?
I think I stopped at about 30,000 knees before I said, okay, got it. Yeah, well done.
It was so tempting to upload a shrubbery.
Okay, so back to pop quiz. You have a file system. What do you look for first? Of course, private keys. grep for --RSA/DSA private key, right? Nothing, unfortunately. That we didn't already know about or didn't ship with Ubuntu. But we did find a shadow file that was for the IC. Those of you, if you don't know what a shadow file is, it's effectively the encrypted password file that is used to basically store the hashes, the salted hashes typically, for the account passwords to authenticate over SSH.
This is where I literally cried. After spending months kind of hunting big game, getting ready to hack the car, trying to find a way in, and it cracks in under a second.
Oops. So now the question is, so we have valid authentication to a car. We can SSH in. But the real question is, how do we get root? Well, actually, the accounts were sudoers, so that wasn't very hard.
That's when I cried again.
So now how do we get to the CID? We did not have the CID shadow. So what do we do? So we kind of went back to the firmware mines and started to look for more.
So what we found is that the car uses a security token. The security token gets rotated every 24 hours. Not a bad design. I know plenty of places that rotate their security tokens never. However, it also appears that the security token is used in lots of places. That's not such a good design. For example, the Tesla One account on the CID uses that security token, or one of those security tokens, as its password. And it's stored in plain text on the file system.
So we went on the IC, found this security token, and we said, well, can we authenticate to the CID? Yes, is the answer. Also a sudoer. Okay, so now we have root on the instrument cluster and the CID of a car. By the way, we should assume that attackers are going to do this, right? You know, this should be the security model. Attackers will get access, they will gain root on the infotainment system, but now the question is, what can they do with that? So we poked some more.
I was confused at first by the way the file systems were laid out, but it kind of becomes clearer later. So the first kind of and most significant memory storage area on the car is it uses something called Tegra NOR, which is a NOR-based memory file system with 10 partitions. The partitions you see are labeled, so you can see them in slash proc. And essentially what it does is it cycles through those different memory regions to boot the car.
We also found that a number of tidbits, so the gateway, for example, if you echo a very particular UDP sequence to it, will open up a telnet port. The CID, that touchscreen, has DSA keys to SSH into the instrument cluster. So now all of a sudden we don't need to rely on a cracked shadow. Now we have actual legitimate keys that we can SSH into it, which is great. And our old friend, the dangling Ethernet.
A little bit of analysis and looking at some scripts, and what we find is the very code that controls the gateway. I said the gateway to this Ethernet, not the gateway between CAN. And a little bit more reverse engineering, and we've built our own replica of the authentication script.
So it's actually a pretty good design, and you need that token. So the token that you're needing to replay and inject into the Open Ethernet in order to get access, you have to have that security token, and there's no way, if you were just kind of open on the internet, that you would know that token unless you could authenticate to that car.
And the fact that it authenticates every 30 seconds is really annoying, because we thought we had it, and we sat there and we started doing stuff and it locked us out. So we sent it again and then it locked us out, and then penny dropped and we had to set up a script that constantly sent it, and problem solved, but annoying.
And the nice thing is, because we have those VPN keys, we could actually, we found the script that retrieved those keys from the mothership, that is the actual name of the server, again, awesome, via an API. So now we have a script that can retrieve the keys from the server. We have a script that can build the Ethernet NAC key, and we can send it every 30 seconds. And now we always have access to the car's Ethernet, assuming we have its car keys. And I think that's a really important distinction, right? Not a remote exploit. You have to have physical access. We had to physically disassemble the car, do terrible, terrible things to the door panel or to the dash panels in order to get those car keys. But once we had those car keys, we were able to maintain our access to that network.
And you can see also now why we called this the decathlon of hacking. It was almost like an entire CTF contest in a box, or in a box with wheels.
Okay, so where are we right now? We can access the CID, the touchscreen, without going through the IC. We have that security token from the mothership. And we can create this Ethernet token wherever we want. This is great. So what do we do from here? Another few tidbits. We actually found that there's vehicle firmware, the actual vehicle firmware systems. I think I did some poking, and that DAS is the Tesla Autopilot system, as far as I can tell. Again, we didn't evaluate the security of any of the vehicle system firmware updates. We think that's a very important thing for people to audit, to understand, to make sure that those updates cannot be tampered with. And we welcome more research in the area.
Well, the reality is we didn't want to tamper with this because of the code of conduct that we set out before. We didn't want to risk messing something up that would cause our friend to break his car and cause me to have to pay for a new one. And also, we wanted to save something for phase 2.
So, if you've ever seen a Tesla service center, there is a Wi-Fi SSID that every Tesla connects to without question.
And guess what? The static WPA key is there. So this means with the right key setup and with a little Wi-Fi pineapple, you can make any Tesla in the world talk to your Wi-Fi as long as it's switched on.
So we don't know what you can do with this. It's still an open area of research. The question is, okay, is that Wi-Fi network somehow more privileged than others? Yeah, we ran out of time. We should certainly try to do more.
I mean, open question. What do you think you can do if you can get someone to connect to your Wi-Fi?
Okay, so but the real elephant in the room is, okay, so we have root on all these infotainment systems. What can we do with that? This was actually a pretty hairy initial challenge because there's a huge number of services running on this server in the car, and I'm going to start using that word. This is actually a server in a car. They're written in Qt, whatever you pronounce it, which is C++, effectively. It's kind of annoying to reverse because you have all of this this dynamic invocation happening all over the place. So it's not like good old straight C where everything is clearly linked together and IDA can cleanly follow it. It's kind of a little bit difficult. So we kind of said, okay, well let's just not starting this as reverse engineer 14 different services and figure out what's going on. Let's kind of step back and say, well, how do we figure out what we're after? So we built a tool called TestCat. It's written in Go. And it processes UDP packets that are broadcast to a particular UDP destination port. And what it does is, there's 500 to 1,000 of these per second. So we wanted to look at what are the unique payloads. Here's an example of what the output looks like. So it identifies all the unique payloads that it hadn't seen before since invocation. It parses the first 2 bytes of the packet, which we determined seem to be highly constant, which what we're kind of roughly calling it is there's a message ID and a command ID. It's probably not the exact right, but it roughly approximates. We allow it to pull from a PCAP file. So if you capture something off the network and you want to replay it offline, you can do that, or you can do a live listen.
And we will be releasing our tools as part of the talk.
They're actually already released. Okay, so what we then do is now we have effectively an anomaly detection system to say, what have we not seen before? And we can basically now trigger things we haven't done before since invocation of TestCat and lock the doors, enable the parking brake. And what we found is there's actually usually one unique UDP broadcast packet per event.
There are some people in the region where we were doing this who think we are incredibly strange because the first thing they saw was us taking a brand new, very expensive car and ripping it apart and scattering parts all over the place. And then the next thing they saw was us sitting in this dismantled car with bits hanging out of it, flashing the headlights and honking the horn several hundred times.
Yeah, they weren't too happy about that. All right. So now the question is, who's sending these packets? So we used strace to figure out what service on the CID was doing it. It turned out to be something called Qt car vehicle, and that I felt a little bit stupid because I probably should have just said that's probably the thing in the first place. But that's the nature of these things. All right. So, but how do we construct the packets? We now have a service we know which is doing this. And now we can finally go to IDA. We have tracked down what binary we're working on. We don't need to traverse across 12 different binaries. I think you can see that. What you can see is a gateway message sender. You see a bunch of really interesting things. GUI light switch request, GUI blinker request, GUI factory mode, VAPI power off request, GUI stop rails, and yeah, all sorts of fun things. But by the way, let me take a step back and say, this is awesome. What I didn't see was can.
This is kind of like the vehicle equivalent of stored procedures. The car has a bunch of commands in the gateway that it will let you send commands to and that it will then relay through the CAN bus, and anything that's not part of that you can't send through. That potentially means that malicious traffic cannot get through the gateway. Now, that doesn't say that the gateway can't be compromised. We did not go that deep into analyzing it, and we certainly saw signs that there are security issues that we would like to look at. But as a basic design, what it means is, unlike with a certain other vehicle, when the infotainment system gets compromised, you cannot immediately send CAN frames that do bad things to the car.
And again, that's huge. I don't think you can say the same thing about many other cars out there. The fact that there is this strong isolation is extremely important. So now we can control a number of things. Basically anything that the CID does, that touchscreen, we can now do. And now the question is, so there's no way, as far as we can tell, to inject CAN frames, from at least so far, onto the vehicle network, but we can use the legitimate API. And the question is, can we abuse the legitimate API? Here's the things we can do. What do you want to try? So again, we set up our SSH tunnel between a CID and a server.
And of course, the one we wanted to try is like, if you're going to do a remote cyber attack against a car, what's the thing you're going to do? It's going to be the most catastrophic one, right? So we found a combination of API that would allow us to basically tell the car to shut off key parts of itself, to shut off the power rails, to switch off the screens, in fact, to shut the computers down. And we tried that.
I will also say we did this in a closed environment at low speed.
We did not do it at 70 miles an hour on a freeway. So it's important to point that this is not a remote access exploit. We had physical access to compromise the car, and then we installed a remote access Trojan to get backdoor access to do what we did. Because Kevin was happy to sit in the car when I stopped it. I wanted to be standing outside with a phone stopping it. It's also important to point out that what you saw there was the car traveling at slow speed. We found that if the car was going anywhere around 5 miles per hour, what happened was the screens would all go black, as you saw. The music cuts off, thankfully. And then the handbrake switches on, and the car kind of lurches to a stop. But if you're going faster than that, what happens is a brief warning comes up on the screen before it goes black, telling you that you can't apply the handbrake at speed. The car then goes into neutral, screens all go black, but you retain control of the steering and the brakes. What this means is, if the infotainment system is killed maliciously or accidentally, you still retain full control of the car and can safely stop. That is phenomenal.
It's huge. All right, so we found a number of things Tesla did well, things they can improve. What are they doing about it? They are pushing an OTA update at ludicrous speed. Like literally, like they can push an entire fleet update in less than a week, which is extremely awesome. The update they pushed yesterday, at least in the car we tested, fixes 2 of the vulnerabilities. Those weak CID passwords, no more. The IC and the CID updater information disclosure, and a bunch of others. And it also hardens the system, and that's really important, is that you should be able to attack a car, pop the browser, and that shouldn't matter.
Also, Tesla has announced that they're hiring someone we all know and respect to be their new head of security.
Dude.
Who's sitting right there.
But seriously, they've been really good to work with. We were a little bit worried at first. We of course didn't know how a car company would respond to us finding kind of bad things in the car. We actually found a lot that we liked, and they've been really, really good to work with. And they're putting a lot of effort into security. And I'm actually really proud to say that we actually have JB Straubel, the CTO and founder of Tesla here, who is going to talk a little bit more about what they're doing to the security community. Come on up.
Thank you very much. Well, when we first engineered the Model S, we knew that the software systems would be a work in progress. We knew that that we weren't going to ship the car and then forget about the software. Vulnerabilities evolve, they get found, they get fixed, and that's really how we approach this. Using the over-the-air update system, that's how we've been able to work, I think, really collaboratively with the security research community, just like what you guys have done, to find new vulnerabilities and then patch them and fix it. And I really want to thank you guys for the great work you've done over a long period of time. It's making the cars safer. It's making the fleet better. And we wanted to also award you with Tesla Challenge coins, all three of you, for this awesome work that you've done.
I wanted to also invite John Herring, who's one of our core collaborators, to come on up as well.
It was John's car that we so cruelly abused.
Thank you. These are very cool.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
One more thing. Thank you guys very much. It's been great to work with you all. And one last thing I wanted to say is that our bug bounty program has been a really big success for us. And we've actually decided to increase the value of the bug bounty program all the way up to $10,000 as a nominal amount. And we may go higher than that in certain cases. So we really invite people to participate that and send us what you find. So thank you.
Oh.
So what better way to thank them for engaging the community so much? First-time speakers at DEF CON, not these two that did most of the talking, but to welcome Tesla, we're going to give them a shot. Good idea?
You got me?
Oh.
Thanks. You got it. No, here.
Gentlemen, cheers. Thank you. Cheers.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Hey, we're not. These guys have 2 minutes of wrap up.
Sorry.
Yeah, get back in here. Sit down.
Is there can we get the slides back?
Can we get the slides back?
Aha. All right, here's the kill chain. Summary of what we found. It's actually, in my opinion, it's really great whenever you're auditing a big system like this to draw this out. Here's what you could find. Here's how you can get in. Notice there's only one path to gateway. That's huge. So when we say what did Tesla really do right here? Awesome OTA process, ludicrous speed. Their VPNs were good. They rotate passwords every 24 hours. And this strong isolation, we can't say that enough how important that is between the drive and the vehicle systems. And of course, they need to improve some things. I know they're working hard on it. The Tesla service Wi-Fi should be using WPA Enterprise, should not have a static key. There's a general perimeter security model. And so we definitely recommend that switch to away from kind of the eggshell principle and more to the every individual system is hardened.
Don't store sensitive credentials in plain text on a file system. I mean,
and there's a lot of communications that are not mutually authenticated and encrypted on the system. So if you assume that the adversary has access to your network or has popped your browser, you're going to want to make sure all of these are encrypted. And so the real hope I have for this talk is that all of a sudden people are asking questions of every car company in the world. And I hope you all do the same if you are in a position to do so.
So we came up with 3 recommendations. The first one is, anything man makes, man can break. There will be vulnerabilities. So you need to have a quick way to patch them and update them. You can't send USB sticks in the post. You can't rely on people taking cars in. And whatever mechanism you use, the user can't pay for, because if you rely on someone to pay for a data subscription to do an OT update, only about 20% of people will even sign up for it. Next one is you have to have strong isolation of the vehicle infotainment system and the drive critical systems. That's really, really important. Airplane manufacturers have known about this for years. Car manufacturers need to start doing the same thing. None of the Jeep stuff would have been possible if they'd done that. And finally, because it's an embedded system, you cannot control who has access to it and when they have access to it. Embedded systems come under attack from all different directions. That means every individual component has to have its own robust security model, so that if any one component is compromised, that doesn't lead to complete compromise of the vehicle.
And finally, this was not a singular effort. There were nearly 20 people on this project, so I wanted to thank all of them for helping this out. I want to particularly call out Alyssa Rogers, who is married to this gentleman right here, who was extremely patient with us as we disassembled cars very, very late into the night in his house.
Being the wife of a hacker is not an easy job.
Particularly Kurt at EFF, who helped make sure we were always doing the right thing. Joe Grand, lots of folks at Lookout and Cloudflare, Too Many to mention. Thank you all. Appreciate it.